Hi, I'm Simon Isaacs and I lead the commercial and industrial print division at Ricoh UK, and this is our Anything in Print podcast. Thank you for joining us today. We are really glad to have you here because this business podcast series is designed specifically for you, the print community. This show is about bringing you the latest advice, tips and strategies from our network of experts within the print and related industries like marketing, business and finance. It's all about knowledge sharing to help you and your organisations reach your purpose and fulfil your business goals. But before we dive in, remember you can find all of our education video content on our Ricoh Anything in Print series page. Now, let's begin. In this episode, I'm really excited to welcome Henrik Müller-Hansen, the founder and CEO of Gelato, a Norwegian-based production print-on-demand solution that allows e-commerce entrepreneurs to localize the production and delivery of customized print products to customers all over the globe. One of the things I loved about this guy when I first saw him on the internet was the question around what important global truth does nobody agree with you? And his response, print is one of the most vibrant, dynamic and fast-growing industries on the planet. And anyone with Henrik's background that who comes into print and describes our industry in that way has got to be worth listening to. So here he is today. Gelato has been growing year on year since its foundation in 2007. But the 2020 e-commerce boom really fueled expansion. And this year, likely to double revenue from $75 million to $150 million. We'll explore the accelerated shifts in cloud printing and on-demand printing, the challenges these trends present to some PSPs, but really the focus today is to explore the exciting opportunities in the world of digital print. Let's start with some purpose, how software is changing business and how Henrik is bringing it to the global print industry. So, Henrik, welcome to the show. Glad to have you here. Let's start the conversation with your story and how Gelato came to life. I think it's incredibly fascinating.
Yeah, so thank you very much, Simon, and it's great to be here. I'm honored to be invited by Ricoh for this podcast. And I also want to say that today, about 15-20% of all our partners are Ricoh connected. So I'm happy for several reasons. So if we go back, kind of as you said, to 2006, 2007, I was operating in telecommunication. Actually, I was CEO for a company named Tele2 in Norway, which was at the time about $400 million revenue. And one of the things with Tele2, which is actually kind of at the cradle of Gelato, was that Tele2 had as a business idea and a strategy not to own assets, but instead to obsess over software. And also, one of the things that we did in Tele2 was we attacked a quite monopolized old mentality based industry. So after 6-7 years in the Tele2 group, I resigned. I had literally no clue what to do, and I started to read about different industries. And I came to this industry, as you said in the introduction. Everyone I've spoken to basically believe printing is dying, and in some parts, you know, if you look at the if you look at the large print runs, the offset print runs. In many cases, that is actually the truth. Many of the large print runs have declined and continue to decline. But there is another element of the industry which is super fascinating, which is actually digital printing. So it's the digital printing part that is the most vibrant and exciting part of the print industry. And very early on, kind of from day one, we said two things should hold true with Gelato. First thing, we should never own assets. We will connect with the best, the most progressive and tech-savvy printers that the world has to offer. And we, on the other hand, who stems from Tele2, Skype, eBay, Amazon, we shall obsess over software. And then the other thing is that digital printing as such is the only asset we should connect to in Gelato. We shall not connect to the offset part of the industry, but only digital printing. And finally, before I leave back to you, one other thing which I feel is fascinating is that during the course of these last couple of years, I would say, printing actually in the world of Gelato has metamorphosized into production. So when we say printing, I think the problem with saying printing is that many people have a preconceived notion about printing. But for me, digital printing actually translates into production of personalized items in micro quantities. That is the power of digital printing. And that is what we're going to speak about during today's podcast, I think.
Yeah, great. And Joe, all of that obviously talks to us in the way of the name of your company, of ice cream. It's a completely clear link between the two. So just for a bit of fun, I know you've explained it to me before, but I loved it. But if you give us a bit of the story behind the name Gelato, because I love the way you linked it to what you've just explained.
Yeah, I mean, naming of companies is one of several things that I am really poor at doing. So we started actually the whole journey, as an entrepreneur, you invest everything you have and own. And so for us, it was really important to create revenue from the beginning. And in Tele2, there was a company named Optimal Telecom. And so I was thinking, well, we're moving to printing, so we can say Optimal Print. And so that was a fairly good name, quite clinical, but it's okay. And it still lives on today, actually. That's our B2C arm. But then in 2011, 2012, we kind of realized we can do so much more than just B2C. So we moved into the platform world, and we kind of became a logistical company more than anything. So I was thinking we need to name the company, and I came up with what I thought was a really good name, and it was Source Logistic. And then I tried to get sourcelogistic.com, but it was not available. So I added an S and it became Source Logistics. And I remember my wife said, it's probably out of all the names I've heard in my entire life, it's the ugliest name. And many people around her widely agreed that that was the case. So I took a step back and I realized I need some help here. And so I reached out to a person named David Plasek, who's supposedly one of the best naming people on the planet. And he has this company named Lexicon Branding, based out of Silicon Valley. And he stands behind, BlackBerry and Pentium and Azure, Microsoft. And he thought for a while, like 2-3 months, and then he pinged me and he said, I know the name. And I said, okay, so what is it? It's Gelato. And I said, no, but seriously, what is the name? No, it is Gelato. And I was like, Gelato, but this is the industry, this is what we're doing, like, why on earth Gelato? And he said, well, a couple of reasons. I mean, you go into an ice cream bar and it's just filled with colors, just like the print industry. Secondly, this is so good, you should consume it now, otherwise it just melts and goes away. Thirdly, everyone loves Gelato, right? Everyone. And fourthly, and that's why you hired me, once you hear Gelato, you will not forget it. So that's the background for Gelato.
Yeah, it's great, and it's a beautiful image, and that's what we're all about. It's a beautiful image. Anyone who's been into, especially an Italian gelato bar, it's a beautiful thing in front of you. As you say, it's full of colour, and it inspires us to want to do something. It's tangible, it's real, and it makes us feel, which is great. And it links me into.
Just say also, it doesn't only inspire you; it actually inspired a person in Italy, and this is totally true. So he sent in his application, and he's been doing ice cream gelato for decades, and he's one of North Italy's best ice cream makers. And he sent an application offering his services to us. So it does attract some interest.
I bet, yeah, absolutely. And in some of the talks you've done that I've seen, you mention and you talk about the beautiful world of digital print and the trends that make it grow faster than in other industries like music. With your company operating globally, what do you see happening out there that's driving all of this?
Yeah, it's a very interesting question, Simon. So I think it's almost worth dividing it into pre-pandemic and now in the midst of the pandemic. So, pre-pandemic, the world already underwent kind of a surge in e-commerce. And e-commerce, to what we spoke about earlier, is a lot about production of customized items. So already before the pandemic, this trend of consumers, you and me and our friends and family members buying customized products, it was already happening. Now, already before the pandemic, we saw some challenges with that. There has been political tension around the world, and that translated many times into a disruption of supply chains. So we saw with operations, as you mentioned, all around the world, with today in 30 countries and in all the BRIC markets, for example, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and it's inherently difficult to ship products into Brazil. And so already before the pandemic, we saw a kind of growth in our business thanks to local production. Also before pandemic, we saw e-commerce companies such as Shopify and Etsy just surge around the world. So empowering entrepreneurs to go and realize their dreams and business ideas, empowered by their technology. And then the third trend that we also saw already before the pandemic was the ESG trend, which is environment, social, and governance. And then the pandemic hit, and the supply chains were truly disrupted. And all of a sudden, you didn't even have a choice, right? Because you couldn't get stuff into certain countries. And that happened to, during the pandemic, which broke out in February, March last year, 2020, we had just out of course of events completed our transformation into becoming an open API platform. So the pandemic hit, we completed the transformation, we connected to Etsy, we connected to Shopify, and allowed sellers on these platforms to all of a sudden connect to Gelato and start to produce in 30 countries around the planet. And that's when the growth really just took off. So I think the pandemic accelerated the inevitable trends, but they would have happened, but now they just got truly accelerated.
Yeah, it sounds empowering for businesses out there.
Listen, I think that we've never, ever lived in a more vibrant and exciting times if you're an entrepreneur. And in some ways, at least for me personally, it began with AWS, Amazon Web Services, where you saw the embryo of how these platform companies empower individuals. And we were kind of one of the first companies in Europe to move over to AWS. So we already saw this power of being able to tap into Amazon on almost like a spot market. And that kicked off. Then you had Dropbox, and then Azure came with 360 and many services that smaller companies could access at minimal to no charge. So today with Shopify, Etsy, and then you have payment platforms such as Adyen and Stripe, you have a lot of the components needed for an entrepreneur to go global. But the missing link, and where Gelato comes in, is that you need the creativity that you put into your enterprise or your company to translate into a production of something. And not only a production, it then needs to come with great quality, on time. And that's really where Gelato, Stripe, and Shopify, or Etsy for that matter, that's really where the whole becomes greater than the sum of the individual parts. And I'm very excited also to announce that in March 2021, We're plugging in an integration with Amazon, with Wix, with WooCommerce, and it doesn't end there. So literally, we poured millions and millions of development hours into building what I believe is the world's largest print-on-demand network, covering 5 billion people literally in 72 hours. But now when you add the power of these platforms, it just becomes truly empowering for an entrepreneur.
Absolutely. And I mean, some intended and unintended consequences, which sounds like a great opportunity for printers, new opportunity for digital, but perhaps a threat for analog print techniques.
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned this part of the equation also, which has to do with our production partner. And I choose again not to say printing, but production partners, because today we do apparel, we do mugs, we do wall art, we're moving into regular books, home decor, and so forth. So for me, it's really production on demand. And what I am so impressed with and energized by is that our production partners all across the planet, they are not only top quality in terms of what they deliver, but they're also truly empowered by another factor of the equation, which is the Ricos of this world and other machine suppliers. Because you have done such a great job when it comes to fueling the digital transformation in this industry. And now when you combine the Rico technology or other machine vendors, because in our case, we connect to all, with really tech-savvy production partners and Shopify and Stripe and Gelato, all of a sudden, as an entrepreneur sitting in Toronto, you can reach a consumer in Shanghai or Melbourne or Moscow in literally a couple of days with your own personalized items. So the printer and our production partner, they receive volume in Moscow, in Shanghai, in Melbourne, that they would never ever get their hands on before the growth and explosion in global e-commerce. Because in the old world, most of the time that product was produced in Toronto and then shipped across the planet. So it's slow, it's inefficient, it's expensive, and it's polluting. So with a new way of, almost digital fabrication, you can bring all of that production into the market where the consumer, the end consumer, actually lives. And that's great for your customers and the buyers of production equipment. And of course, it's fantastic for the seller and the buyer.
Yeah, absolutely. I think people forget as well that the digital printing process, creating something on a computer, submitting it to some sort of queue and some sort of manufacturing. Digital print has been doing that for some time. We're looking now at 3D. We're looking at direct-to-garment printing. We're looking at producing products like wallpapers. It's the same process. Your platform, it serves the future of what we're going to do. So, I mean, with that in mind, I mean, do you want to give us some insight into how you think this print production industry is going to continue to thrive after the pandemic?
Well, it's very interesting because historically you spoke a lot about mass production, but mass production is rapidly moving towards mass customization. And mass customization in turn is fueled by creativity and like millions of entrepreneurs. I read, I think it was in McKinsey Quarterly, that in Q4 2020, in the United States, more e-commerce stores were created than during the last 10 years. So everywhere in the equation you look, you have made a lot of progress. We have made a lot of progress as an ecosystem. And then, of course, all of that is fueled by, in the other end, consumers that wants to shape based upon their own taste and their world around them. So they want to buy the products that they have chosen by themselves. So this trend of mass customization, after all, is fueled by the consumer demand. But then you need, along that supply chain, you need a lot of changes to happen. And this is to what you alluded to. This is not something that we have done overnight, because the actual challenge with Gelato does not lie in the actual production process. It lies in everything around the production process. Like, how do we receive the files? How do we build automatically the print plates? How do we organize the print plates based upon what shipment method and delivery method the customer has chosen? How do we then send those print plates to the right print house all across the planet? How do we get them to produce with consistent quality, package it in the way, it's like millions of parcels now, like, you know, in 2021. And how do you package that in a consistent way? How do you bring tracking on that and then display it to the end customer and our customer service, and on and on and on and on. In Gelato today, connecting underneath, I think we have roughly, you know, over 2,000 sub-suppliers supporting this global platform. And this has, as I said, not been created overnight, but now when you open it up and look at the trends around the world, everyone can tap into this development, and everyone can tap into production partners that in this particular case own Ricoh equipment, and they can be based in New Zealand, in Canada, and anywhere in the world. And so the big winner here, I would say, is the consumer and the entrepreneurs.
Absolutely. I think focusing on the value we deliver to the end customers is what's going to, you know, fuel great customer service and great engagement with customers moving forward. And that's what all organizations out there really want to and need to do. I mean, we've talked a bit about the purpose and what we're doing. Let's look at how we do it. And I know printers can sometimes be a little bit scared of acronyms and digital software solutions. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about your API solution, which enables this new generation of entrepreneurs and e-commerce store owners to sell, produce, and deliver, as you've said, customized stuff around the world without the hassle of managing orders, inventory, international shipping. From our listeners who don't fully understand the API business, can you just demystify this sort of acronym and what it means to them?
Yeah, I mean, API is a predictable language that you use to connect to any module in Gelato. So for example, if you want to connect to our distribution module, you can speak directly to our distribution module with a language that we display on our webpage. And if you just follow the instruction on our webpage, all of a sudden you can start to speak to our distribution module. So in lack of a better analogy, it's a language in order for you to speak to a platform. And it's different components, and that language is getting easier and easier by the day. So what it allows anyone to do is to select, you know, bits and pieces of a platform. You don't need to connect like monolithically to Gelato. You can be very selective and you can speak to different parts of our platform. So for example, if you want to speak only to our wall art part of Gelato, you connect through our language to just the wall art section. And then you can, for example, be powered up by Etsy or Shopify, and then you have their platform and their services also to support you. So it's actually not that complicated, and APIs are starting to proliferate in most of the tech industry. It's a more and more common way of empowering customers to use selectively any part of your services.
Yeah, so basically they don't have to do everything themselves. You can help them manage the relationships they need, so they can collaborate to maybe plug holes in their business, facilitate other customer demands, offer a fuller solution to their customers.
Yeah, and I also think that you know, when I think about our production partners, or what you call printers, I actually see a different side of our production partners. I see many production partners that are very tech savvy. We just had a great meeting. I'll give you one example. We just had a great meeting with a partner in the Middle East, and the owner there, he had actually tested all our API connections. He qualified, how easy it was to activate our platform, use our services. And there are really more and more of our print partners are leaning into, the capabilities that you and many other machine vendors are supplying them with. So I actually, during the last decade, I have seen a quite significant shift in curiosity, mentality, and tech savviness. And I think, if I can guide in any way, I think that is actually quite important capabilities to develop if you're a printer today, because you just cannot do everything on your own. You said it before. I think the world is out there with so many great new technologies and platform services that you can more and more do what you are best at doing, and really tap into what Gelato has developed, or Rico, and many other suppliers in the ecosystem, so that you don't have to do everything on your own. And this was not the case 10 years ago. And perhaps it was not even the case 5 years ago. And so just during the last 5 years, so much has changed, and so many big opportunities. If you're a digital production hub today, so many interesting opportunities has emerged. And the digitization of the whole supply chain is, of course, important for any production partner, any printer, to tap into and relate to, because the world of mass production is going away, and is being replaced by the world of mass customization. And what better situation and position can you be in than a digital print partner?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think some of the stats that we all see around the world, sort of, maybe 20% of the value of print is digital, but 97% of the volume is still analog and litho. There is a huge area to go after with this customization. And I think one of the really interesting things that we've discussed in the past is there's sometimes a cynicism with platforms, and people look to it as a way to commoditize. But you explained it to me with the 2 + 2 = 5 here. There is the opportunity to benefit all parties, because this expansion actually delivers value. Do you want to just mention that element of this?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the offline retail industry, it is still, by far the lion's share of what is happening in retail. But the trend and where this industry is going is bluntly clear to everyone. So it means that you have many forces that for, I would say, decades will fuel the growth of e-commerce, and thus the digitalization of what used to be mass produced into mass customization. And when we connect to our print partners or production partners, all of a sudden they get access to volume that previously was inaccessible for them. And when you look at the combination of the e-commerce platforms, the global payment solutions, and what Gelato represents, what you are as a machine vendor providing, as next generation print equipment to your customers all around the world. When you combine those 4, 5, 6 forces, I say it's not 4, 5, 6, it's 10, it's 15, 20, whatever. The whole is much greater than the sum of the individual parts. And there are other economical, incentives here for the players in the value chain or the supply chain that are super interesting. I actually listened to a very interesting podcast with the person who's heading supply chain management in a company named Fung, F-U-N-G. It's a massive middleman in the clothing apparel industry, connecting the producers with the global sellers, right? And when you look at what they are saying, it's actually not, when it comes to the apparel industry, it's actually not the production of the clothing that's the biggest cost. It's the markdown. It's the markdown when you cannot link supply to demand. And so what they are doing, and they are working with all the usual suspects in the retail industry, they are doing is very interesting, because they're actually analyzing social media, weather, all of those things, and through AI, providing predictions into the production units so that they can match supply and demand, so that the markdown, to as great of extent as possible, is being avoided, right? Now, what does that say about digital on-demand production? What does that say about production on demand? And so when you take that example, which I just think is a great anecdote to describe what the challenges and the opportunities are between the old world and the new world, and you kind of fast forward that into different product categories, and it becomes truly interesting to analyze the whole, the value of the whole, compared to the sum of the individual parts, right? Because as supply chains are being challenged like never before, every component in the old way of producing and shipping, every component needs to be synchronized, right? Otherwise you have a mismatch.
Yeah.
Whereas with digital fabrication or on-demand digital production, you have so much more flexibility. And it turns out that this is, I believe, the true growth lever for production on demand for Rico and other machine vendors and your customers and our business model. That's actually to provide that flexibility in the value chain that the old traditional way of producing cannot supply you with. And I think it's important to remember that in the case of Gelato and in the case of Rico production partners, we are not shipping bits or bytes. We are actually shipping atoms, real atoms. And if you can do shipping of real atoms more effectively, I think there is a massive, massive growth opportunity right in front of you. And then if you can make those atoms customized to each consumer's individual demand, it becomes really interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is why Rico are very, very interested in getting more of our customers looking at your network and the purpose of it. I mean, one of the things that strikes us about it is how much wastage we can eliminate through mass production. People look at unit costs, and then often they don't look at wastage, and putting the right thing in the right place at the right time in a way that's more meaningful to the person who's going to use it actually cuts out a huge amount of wastage, and it's very much more sustainable way, an eco-friendly way of doing things. And you had a really nice story which you told me, which highlighted some of this sustainability. I don't know whether you can remember it. I need to prompt you on that one.
Was it about the Maori people? Or?
Yes, yeah, it was, yeah.
Yeah, no. I mean, yeah, because it's interesting. We speak about sustainability as a homogeneous terminology, but actually it consists of what I say, or not what I say, what the world definition is ESG, environmental, social, and governance. And if you look at the example you alluded to, the Maori people, I was contacted a couple of months ago by the Maori people and a spokesperson from the Maori tribe in New Zealand, saying that they had identified kind of like 2 companies that could help them and their artists. They have a very rich history of art and traditions, a history that is admired by people all over the world. And that translates into a lot of beautiful art. Now, in the old world, as we spoke about before, they would have that designed, produced, and shipped from New Zealand. But in the new world, they can actually, in the artists there, they can go on Shopify and set up their own store, and then they can download the Gelato app, and they can connect to us. And then all of a sudden, these artists with that rich history, they can reach the world and reach consumers that are a fan of this type of art. So we actually work together with a handful of artists in the Maori tribe. We did a 4, 5, 6 week long course, and now they use Shopify. They're powered by Gelato, and through that combination of platforms, they can now reach the world with Maori art. But there is another twist to that, coming back to your discussion about waste and sustainability, because it's not only that they can reach the world and we produce to consumers, be them living in Sao Paulo or New York or Oslo or London, but actually anything that a customer and a consumer in New Zealand orders is shipped to our print partners in New Zealand, which brings a dimension twofolded into the S, the social, right? Because the artist can make a living and sell their passion to the world, but the entrepreneur in Oakland, they actually all of a sudden receive in their Ricoh machines production for consumers in New Zealand that have ordered other stuff on Gelato or through Shopify or Etsy. So the S has two components to it. It's great for the entrepreneurs, but it's also great for the production partners. And then, of course, the environmental aspect of this is pretty obvious, because instead of printing in another country and flying it to New Zealand, you produce on demand what you need, where you need it, when you need it, and that's just a much smarter and better way for the world and the consumer and the seller to have their creativity translated into a product that is actually produced in New Zealand. And then the actual governance, I mean, we have very clear code of conduct. We only connect to very serious, professional, tech savvy print partners, and so we also control in quite a good way the G of ESG. So I guess sustainability is a bit narrow when you speak about environment, but ESG, it's an easier and more effective way of kind of assessing what good do you do, what do you contribute with through Gelato and through the use of our platform.
Yeah, and I like it. It's almost taking a pulse from the heart and making sure it's in good shape. And I know we also share views on the next generation and the people that we want to inspire. And print is a massive industry. It's absolutely huge. People, I think, underestimate the global size of it. And we want to inspire people to not just work for money and a good paycheck and security, but for purpose as well, and feel good about what they do. And when people are part of your network and they're printing stuff that they know has this meaning behind it, that must feel good to them to do as well and be part of.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I got a comment that I couldn't foresee that I would get that comment when we started or when I founded this company, but it was an investor in Europe that reached out, and that investor felt that Gelato is one tool to combat global unemployment, which is actually a pretty cool thing to think about. And actually, it is true with reference to the case I just told you about from the Maori tribe. I mean, that enables an entrepreneur to actually go and envision and make reality of that, about that vision, or her business idea. And then to the size of this opportunity, you mentioned before, and I often take this as an example to, you know, existing and new partners of Gelato, that when I started this company, I looked at some different industries, as I said, and one industry that I read about was online music. And in online music, you have, you know, Shopify and Spotify. I'm only thinking about Shopify now, but Spotify and iTunes and so forth. And that whole industry globally is about $9 billion. When you go back and you think about digital printing back in 2006, 2007, it was about 70, 80 billion dollars. When you fast forward to today, digital printing is roughly $200 billion. So basically it means that for every single year, and this is why I said when we spoke the first time, that I actually think that digital printing, not printing, but digital printing, is one of the most exciting and fast growing dynamic industries in the whole world. So every single year since this company was founded, the digital print industry has grown faster and more than the total size of online music every single year. So coming back to the whole is greater than the sum of the individual parts. I mean, we are in a very fortunate situation in this industry because we don't need to go to kind of the mentality of the zero-sum game. We can actually, there is enough growth ahead of us for all of us to cooperate and make sure about one thing, that we give the end customer and the seller on all these global e-commerce platforms the best possible experience. And sometimes I take the case of Toy Story versus Shrek. You know, Toy Story was released and everyone just loved it, right? I mean, I think it even won an Oscar for the first Toy Story movie. And then Shrek came, and it was such a beautiful family experience that every kid in the world wanted to go and look at Shrek. And Shrek became a massive success. So the question then is, when Toy Story 2 was released, did fewer or did more families go to watch Toy Story 2? Well, it turns out more went to look at Toy Story 2. Why? Because it's, you know, just a great experience and the supply is abundant, right? It's digital distribution. And so in that particular case, you know, there is no zero-sum game. The better the end product is, the faster you will grow and the better the end customer's experience will be. And this is, you know, a positive flywheel effect. And I think, fortunately for us, I think we're in this unique situation where the growth of another company in this industry will accelerate the growth of other companies in this industry. So focus on more cooperation. Don't feel you need to go and solve everything on your own. And look at this fantastic opportunity and embrace it because it's not going away.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely fantastic advice and an incredibly fascinating discussion. And the thought that, you know, so many people see printers commoditized, but there's so much opportunity out there. And it's not a zero-sum game will be inspirational to many guys out there that probably had a tough year this year with the pandemic and with industries they serve being closed down, you know, in so many places. So those end customers just simply aren't there. They're at home, bored, waiting to get out. But that's going to end soon and we're all going to get out. So have we got any closing advice for our listeners, Henrik?
Well, I mean, thank you for a good discussion and great questions, Simon. But I would say perhaps that, you know, moving from mass production to mass customization, that's not going away. But there is another component that I could add to it, which is, I think the business models that are allowing consumers and markets and industries to decentralize, to bring what previously was centralized and isolated to a few. The models that will empower and, in lack of a better word, democratize the access to those components that previously was kind of captured to a few. I think those are the business models for the future. And I can honestly think of fewer, more exciting places to be in than to be a production hub, having access to digital printing equipment or digital production equipment, and leveraging upon this enormous growth, the exponential growth in e-commerce, fueled by a consumer demand that will only accelerate, and then supported by what you guys are doing at Ricoh and other fantastic machine vendors are doing, allowing these digital print production hubs to just embrace this e-commerce trend and the global shift in supply chain. So whatever you can do to be part of that, that's what I would invest my time and energy in.
Right, great advice, fantastic discussion. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Simon, and thank you, Ricoh.
That's a wrap for today. Thanks for listening. I hope you found this episode informative. If so, make sure you subscribe to all of our upcoming episodes and let us know any feedback you may have. You can also connect with myself and my guests on our Anything in Print series page.